All right, welcome back. This is the Front Row Podcast with Coach Mark Gottfried, and I have had some amazing guests and some people that have achieved at a very, very high level. And today's guest, man, I'm really pumped up because I've got a guy that I met years and years ago at a Dick Vitale fundraiser down in Bradenton, Florida. We actually ended up sitting at the same table. And I'm going to tell you, Jimbo Fisher, that from that day forward, I've been a guy that's been rooting for you. Like, I've always been rooting for you from a distance, and just because of who you are as a person. So thank you for joining us, Jimbo Fisher. Thank you, man.
Great to be with you, Mark. I said, actually, it was great to meet you. Like you say, coaches, we always know each other from afar until we get up to, and like you say, have events like Dick's, which is one of the great events in all the, for fundraising and the Dickie V thing. I mean, he raises so much money and what he's done for so many people. But you get to meet so many other and like not just your football. Like, we're in meetings with all the football guys.
Right.
What are the basketball guys like? What are the baseball guys like? And you get to meet everybody. And what you figure out, everybody's the same as you are. Everybody's grew up the same way. You grew up. You're just normal guys trying to make a living, doing something you love to do. And you're fortunate to the acquaintances you make in this business and the friendships are really amazing. To me, it's one of the most special things about the coaching, I say, fraternity.
Yeah. It is, and there's so many things, Jimbo, or there's so many times where we all cross paths with different people, athletic directors,
Yep.
friends, coaches, and so our worlds become pretty small. And, guys that have coached too, we all get it. We understand how hard, this profession is. And so I think, like you said, the fraternity of coaches, hopefully there's always a good respect for one another, because what we do, a lot of people turn on the TV, they think it's easy. This isn't very easy what we do. And so there's highs, there's lows, but we get it.
You're right. I mean, say the coaches understand each other. It's funny when I've had, now I'm getting some ex-players that are really wanting to get serious about coaching, got out of their profession. Played pro ball a long time. Mm-hmm. And people, listen, playing and coaching is two different animals. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I have one of them called me, you mean you guys were up here? Were you guys up here till 10 o'clock at night? Were you up here till 11 o'clock at night? Yeah, every day. And coming back at 6, he said, man, there ain't no, I said, now you guys see why I get so frustrated. We spend 18 hours a day on something and you're not paying attention in a meeting. He said, I get it now. He said, I'm up here. And he said, but just, he had, some of those guys had no idea the time consumption and the amount of time and consideration you go into planning to make sure they're successful. Yeah. I mean, it's an amazing thing when you go on that coaching side of it, and that fraternity is so small, but you got it. We're the only ones who understand each other. Yeah. And I think that's what it gets down to.
It's amazing, Jimbo, because my fiance and I'm getting ready to get married, but we were talking one day and she said, well, when you were coaching like at NC State, like how many weekends off a year did you have? And I said, maybe about 2 or 3. And what people don't understand as well, Jimbo, is when you're good or you're trying, and we're all trying to be good, is that phone rings and you got a kid that says, or a parent that says, hey, we can be on campus tomorrow on an unofficial visit, then you got to drop what you're doing and you got to be there. I can't just blow it off and say, okay, well, we'll do it another time. There's so your time commitment, I'm sure for you throughout the years, most people, they just don't understand what goes into being a coach at the level where we coached.
No, you're exactly right. I can say, what weekends do you have off? None. I mean, the only ones when the NCAA blocks you from coming on campus. You know what I'm saying? There's a couple of those months, and it's only with the new rules now, especially in football, all the visits you have in the spring and summer. Those at the end of June, I was just more wore out than I probably was at the end of the season. Believe that or not, and that's going into the season.
Right.
Then you're getting ready, and in like 2 weeks, you're starting up practice and camp. And I tell you what, people don't realize the toll it takes on your family. Yeah. And the amount of things you don't always get. Now, there's great perks to it. Like my kids said, Dad, we missed some things, but to be able to go to the opportunities and travel and be at the games and do things, they loved it. But man, this is the normal things that a normal parent gets to do on the weekend with his kids. Or sometimes you got to miss a ball. But, I did everything humanly possible not to miss games and things like that. But sometimes, this, it can't be done. Right. It's just the constraints, and you have to have an unbelievable family in the deal. And then, like you say, you can do everything right, and it's still not good enough. That's the part that makes a huge difference.
Jimbo, let's go back a little bit. So you grew up in West Virginia, and you end up kind of, joining in with the Bowden family early. playing for Tommy and then coaching. But, a lot of people don't realize, and I actually had to go back and I actually was just reading a little bit at Samford University, which people outside of the immediate South, they don't understand what a great university Samford University is, by the way. It's a special place. It's a beautiful place, beautiful campus. But at that time, Division III, you were the Division III National Player of the Year. How about that?
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know that, Jimbo.
Yeah, it was. Terry. See, Terry. It wasn't. It was Terry. Terry was the one who actually coached me, not Tommy.
Oh, yeah, you go.
Terry. It was Terry and Jeff. Terry and Jeff were on the same staff at Salem College, and I had played for them at Salem. He had came in there as a young coach. Terry got the job at like 26, 27. Took a job in NEIA, which at that time is all your Division II schools now, and we played there and had great success. And when he took that job, he got me to transfer and go there. And that was the first year there. And then we were able to have a great year right off the bat. It was fun coming to Birmingham. Here, I'll tell you some irony in this whole deal. How Samford interacted with my life is crazy, because the first game we played at Salem College, Bobby Bowden used to be the head coach at Samford University. That was one of his first head coaching jobs besides Middle Georgia, which at that time was Howard University.
That's right.
And so when they had dropped football in the early 70s. They brought it back in 1984. And our first game at Salem College, when I was a true freshman, I was a starting quarterback. Terry brought in, there was like 13 of us that transferred in from schools I actually had been at Clemson on a baseball scholarship, believe that or not. And there was a bunch of us transferred. Our first game, and it was Samford's first game back starting football, was against Samford. So I played my first one against him and my last one for him.
Wow!
If that's not a crazy a crazy deal, it was. And the other at that time, of course I made All-American, was National Player of the Year. The only other All-American quarterback that was ever at Samford at that time, Bobby Bowden.
Wow!
Because Bobby played there.
That's right.
I mean, the Bowden coincidence with my life is crazy. And Bobby did the same thing I did. He transferred because he originally went to Alabama. But after the first semester, he came home and married Ann. And at that time, how about this rule, Mark? You could not be on scholarship at Alabama and be married at the same time.
Wow. How about that?
So to go marry Ann, he had to decide, do I leave Alabama and give up my scholarship, or do I go marry Ann? He went and married Ann, and then he transferred back home in Birmingham to Howard College, believe that or not. So, I mean, Samford's been intertwined. And right now, my youngest son is a kicker at Samford.
Oh, that's great. Isn't that great?
It's amazing how, like you say, how everything in this world kind of comes in full circles, and you never dream. Like Sam, I'd never heard of Samford. I played my first game against them. Never heard of them. You know how bad we beat them? We beat them 82-9. We beat them 82-9, and then you turn around and play for them, and we went 9-1. I mean, it's just crazy how life is sometimes.
And you know what's interesting? When I coached at Alabama, I was there 11 years, Jimbo. How about this? 11-year run, and they had 5 different head football coaches in an 11-year period, which the end of my last year and a half was Nick Saban. But it was Mike DuBose, Dennis Franchione, Mike Price, who never coached a game, Mike Shula, then Nick Saban. But during that whole time, everybody at Alabama always talked about the one that got away, which was Bobby Bowden. They tried to lure him back, and then the stories are all, you ever hear everybody has a different story, but he went in there. I know the story. I guarantee you do, and that they kind of made him interview a little bit, and he's like, hold on a minute now, I got to sit through an interview and the trustees. So how things happen. He could have been at Alabama, and maybe that whole run he had at Florida State wouldn't have been what it was. But the Bowden family has been for you, I think, probably it's an amazing relationship.
Blessed. Yeah. And in this business, it's not always what you know, it's who you know to get opportunities. Mm-hmm. And they embrace me like one of their family. I mean, when I first started coaching, and I was learning to coach, and see, we did everybody hears about the Manning Passing Academy. Everybody talks about that. Well, that idea for the Mannings the Bowdens had a passing academy. They were the first ones to ever do a quarterback receiver camp. They wanted to do one because Bobby, again, in coaching, you don't get together. So when Bobby was coaching at Florida State at the time, all of his kids, Tommy's coaching, Jeff's coaching, Terry's coaching. So they, to get back together, they wanted to be together. So they started this academy for quarterbacks and receivers, and that, and with Bobby's name. And I was actually the quarterback coach in that academy that started it. So I got to be around Bobby at a young age. And like when they would go, like Terry said, let's get down and watch Florida State practice. So I would ride down with him. I would stay at Bobby's house. I didn't stay in a hotel. Terry took me. I was like a family member. I'd give me a room on the side. I went and stayed in the room, went to their practices, sat in their meetings. They'd go to a bowl game. When I first became an offense coordinator at Sanford in 1991, going into the 91 season, they were playing Penn State at the Blockbuster Bowl. And it was 2 top 10 teams, a great game in Fort Lauderdale. And so Terry says, come on, I want you to go sit in the meeting. So they took me, paid for my hotel room, everything. And like when Bobby game planned that whole week of practice, I got to sit in their meetings and just listen. How they, and not just the plays, but the organization, how you set your practices up, what you tried to do during the week, how you got your team ready. And then during the game, sometimes I would sit in the box and I listened on the headsets when Bobby still called plays as the head coach. And I got to listen to him call the game, and I didn't have anything on, but just how they talk through the game and philosophize. Because I'm getting ready, me and Terry are ready to go. So, the training I had and what they did for my career and the way they opened themselves up, it was like family. Some people always thought I was related to them somehow because they treated me so well and took care of me so well. And, I got to learn to do things the right way. And then on top of that, Bobby's as big a Christian man as there is. So his ability to recruit, Bobby, that, hey, buddy, within 2 minutes, you thought you knew the guy 20 minutes. And then you wonder why he got every daggone recruit under the sun. He had that, and he did it. He had his moments, man. He could turn, his competitor came out, but he didn't do it with the mean, and he let you do your job. And I got exposed to them and the family at such an early age. It was so beneficial to my career from knowing how to do something, because you spend your whole life. How's that coach do it? What's the best way to do it? Well, I'm with one of the best guys that ever lived in the families, and I learned to do it. And, there's other ways to be successful, obviously, but I was fortunate enough to get a group of guys, and then they gave me opportunities. And of course we went to Auburn and then moved on, and everything else happened. And I was so blessed. And the Bowden family to me is like family, and I owe them everything.
For me, Jimbo, it was Jim Herrick. I went to UCLA, and he did the same thing. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, I'm a graduate assistant, and then he promoted me up, and, I became one of the full-time assistants. But he treated me like one of his sons, and I'll never forget that. It's kind of like you with what, Bobby and the way he extended himself to you. No matter what happens, you're and that's one thing I've always liked. It bothers me, too, sometimes with coaches. They forget who've helped them, by the way. A lot of people forget.
Oh, there is no doubt.
And they forget along the way who has come along. Because without people helping you and me and all of us and everybody that's coached, there is no, Jimbo Fisher like we know you. There is no Mark Gottfried. And you had a chance to learn from Bobby Bowden, like I did with Jim Herrick, and I played for a great coach in Wimp Sanderson. But, those lessons you learn on a daily basis. And I can remember learning how to develop a practice plan, like just how I wanted to do a practice, minute by minute. And so I'm sure for you've already talked about a little bit, but some things you learned along the way from Bobby Bowden and the Bowden family that probably impacted you more than anything. What would some of those kind of things be?
I'll tell you the best advice I ever got in coaching. It came from Coach Bowden. I'm sitting there as a young coach. I'm at Sanford. Of course, you want to be at Florida State. You want to coach at Alabama. You want to coach at all the big schools. How can I'm 24, 25 years old. Coach, how can I get up there with you? I'll never forget in his own little way. We're sitting at the Bowden Academy. Because he and I had a bad habit. We both chewed tobacco. He would sit back there, believe it or not, and we're sitting back there having a chew. And his feet's up by the pool. Our feet's plopped up on the floor. We're sitting by the pool and talking, and these conversations would be at night. He said, buddy, I'm going to give you the best advice I ever got. He said, do a good job at the job you got.
That's it.
Somebody will notice, and you'll get another job. He said, all these guys that try to get jobs, and all they do is spend all day. He said, you end up not doing a good job at the one you got.
That's right.
He said, every job I ever got in this business, I never applied for. Somebody come and wanted me to do it because I happened to be doing a good job at the one I was at. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And he said, every one I tried to get, I never got. So he said, I learned at a young age. Just go be the best coach you can be, coach your tail off, and guess somebody will tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, you might want to do this. And from that day on, And there was guys that moved, I was around, sometimes they'd move fast. I mean, you think, man, I'm as good as that guy. You know what it's like. I mean, but hey, just shut up and do a good job at the ones you had.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to do it. And every job I ever had, I never applied. Somebody came and tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, would you like to coach over here? Would you like, this is something for you to think about. Instead of chasing jobs and chasing money, he said, don't chase money, don't chase jobs, chase perfection. He said, do a good job for those kids. Somebody will notice. And that was the best advice I ever got. I mean, then, of course, how you organize a practice, the amount of time. Like you say, all right, I want to go do this, but, you only got so much time. Mm-hmm. How much time do I work on this? How much time do I work on that? And how to and then how to get your team. All right, we practice hard, but then we got to have our legs at the end of the week. But you still got to push them at the beginning of the week. And then also what I learned, I think, big thing, which Coach Bowden was always better after a loss than he was after a win. And he taught and he educated his coaches and his players. And, he didn't come in ranting and raving and throwing, you think, oh, boy, they played bad. So the fans are thinking he's going to come in and tear them up. Mm-hmm. No, to me, that's when he was his best. And I say this, Nick Saban was too. I was around Nick too at a young age. Mm-hmm. Actually, it's crazy, because intense as Nick is, people think about him. He was his best after a loss. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Now, there was times he got on people when he made his points, but usually it was education, teaching, why did it happen? And then sometimes when you won, you learn how to push guys. In other words, now's the time, they're in a good mood. You can challenge them again. You know what I mean? All those little things that you think just you took for granted in preparations, and then off season, and then recruiting. I mean, I thought Coach Bowden, I think he's the best. If he's not the best recruiter, he's arguably, there's different ways to go about it. But man, he could walk in a home. I've watched him do it, and he was genuine in himself. And I think that's what he taught me. You can't be somebody else. Like he said, his idol was Paul Bear Bryant. Like you said, Alabama was his dream job.
Oh, yeah.
He went to Alabama as a player. He grew up in Birmingham. That's where he wanted to coach. And I'll tell you that story later on. It happened between the 86 and 87 year. It was when you were there.
Yeah.
See, I remember, Mark, when I went to Sanford was 87.
Yep.
That's when y'all had that great team and went to the Elite Eight.
Yep.
You and Jim Farmer and Derek McKee.
Yep.
And that whole group. I remember that team. Y'all had one heck of a team in basketball that year. And I remember because in those summer league games, they'd always play in Birmingham in the summer league. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you played those games at Sanford University, if you remember.
That's right.
They played at the Birmingham Jefferson Civic Center and at Sanford. You guys used to come out every now and then. I would just walk by because I played basketball too. I would just come by and watch everybody play. You saw all the NBA guys and the college guys playing, right. and it was a big deal. But how to just present yourself, how to carry yourself, how to recruit, how to manage your time in the off season. Those are things that got me through. And then I remember those words about him, just go to work and be yourself. I can't be, he said, I can't be Bud Bryant, but I can idolize him and learn, take things from somebody, but you got to put them in your own perspective, because he said this, people don't follow people who are not genuine.
That's right.
People can see through that as a coach. If you're trying to fake it and be like so-and-so, your players see it in 2 seconds and it doesn't work. So, a lot of little things like that people think, well, that's common sense. Well, sometimes common sense isn't common anymore.
That's right. That's right.
and it was, I was fortunate to be able to do that.
Well, let's go ahead and dive in, because you've teased everybody now. And I'm going to tell you, Mal Moore was the athletic director at Alabama for most of my 10 years, during that 11-year period. Probably one of the people that I loved more than anybody in the world. And, it's rare that, when you're let go, you still have a relationship with the AD. Like, I still had a relationship with him way after. And I loved him, and he loved me and my family, and he'd always ask about my kids. He'd call me, check on me later. Probably one of the best human beings that I've ever been around. But Mal Moore, who also played at Alabama, the whole Bear Bryant connection, his closest friend was Bear Bryant's son, obviously Paul Bryant Jr. But, it's the one that got away was Bobby Bowden. That was the one that got away. And then obviously Nick Saban came along later and kind of restored the program. But there was a 15, 20-year period in there, and I was the basketball coach during that time. Like I said, they rolled through 5 head coaches in 11 years. 5 in 11 years. That's unreal.
I remember.
But
I was coaching at Auburn. I didn't mind.
But the fans,
Auburn,
the people they always felt was, we should have had Bobby Bowden here. Bobby Bowden. It was always Bobby Bowden. That's what you heard all the time during that stretch.
It was after the 86 season, and that's when Ray went back to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as the head coach. He took over for Coach Bryant, remember, and then after the 86 season. Well, Coach Bowden and them they were 7-2-2, and they beat Indiana in the All-American Bowl in Birmingham, Alabama. And after that game, that was Coach Bowden's dream job, was to come back to Alabama, because he was a Woodlawn boy. He grew up in Woodlawn, played at Woodlawn, right. Did the whole thing, and so they called and he understood. All right, I've got the job. He said, "No, he said they want to talk to you." He said, "But I'm going in just to meet everybody." And he thought he was the way he understood. Joab Thomas was the new president. They got a new president, and he had left, and Joab was there, and he came from Georgia Tech. Mm-hmm. And so Bobby come in and say, "Okay," they told him he has the job. Yes, I'm not interviewing for it. I said, "I'm not going to interview for the job if you want me," because at that time he was 57 years old. And he said, "Okay, I'll take. I'm going to do the job." So he goes in, like you said, to that interview, or not interview, but meet and greet or whatever it was. And it turned into an interview.
That's right.
And he did not realize at the time he was going in to do it. And they started doing all that. And when he said, "Whoa, hold up here," and he got up and he walked out and he called Florida State back and said, "Listen, I'm not, I'm staying there. I'm not." He did not want to interview him because Joab was pushing back, and he wanted an academic guy, and he wanted this, and he had these things he wanted to, because Joab is a huge academic guy. I mean, I know how presidents are, mm-hmm. But you don't realize one thing: presidents don't understand how important ball. Listen, that's your average, that's your front porch. You can be as academic as you wanted to get the right coach to win games, and then you can build every academic building in the world because everybody's going to donate to you. But he went in, and so when Bobby walked out and told them, he said, "No, I'm not coming, and I'm staying here." And of course, he went and hired Bill Curry, who was with him at Georgia Tech.
Right. That's exactly right.
And then 3 years later, and then believe it or not, that's when the Bowden run started. Mm-hmm. That's when the 14 straight years of top fives happened. And Bobby said, he and A&T tell me this too. I mean, he used to sit down with me, especially those last couple years before I took over. And then we would sit and talk for hours. And he would the history of things and how to do things and how to handle situations. Everybody thought he and I didn't get along. He mentored me like crazy. Even when I went to A&M, believe it or not, he bought the Houston paper and kept up with me on a daily basis.
Wow.
And we would still call. And I tell you what he did, which was one of the greatest things he ever did as a head coach when he took over. And I'll get back to the Bobby story. He told me this sitting on one of those pools in like the late 80s. When I retire, I'm going to walk away from the place I'm at, and I'm not going to be around for at least 5 to 10 years. Mm. And I'm not going to comment in the paper. He said, "It's not fair to the new head coach." He said, "That happened to him somewhere, somehow. I don't know how it happened." And he said, "That's wrong for that new head coach, because everybody's, even if you're doing right, they're looking over your shoulder how the old boy." Coach Bowden did. And he said, "I am not going to do that." So people assumed he would not come around because I was there. No, but we talked on the phone all the time. Mm. He did it for me. And he did it for Florida State. So that transition, and of course, we won the national championship. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean this. We're the only one who's really taken over for a legend and done it. Mm-hmm. And everybody said, "We know, Jimbo, you did a good job." Coach Bowden allowed me to do that. Mm. He allowed me to create my own identity at Florida State. And it was his selflessness and not his ego, because you know how old coaches are. They want to give me a position here, give me a thing there. And then they hang around, they make comments every day, and the papers go, and news people are going to them all the time instead of going to the head coach. But he allowed that to. It just tells you who he was. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? But going back to that, so that's when that run started for Florida State from '87 to those 14 straight years was after that. But he said, Bear Bryant will always be Coach Bowden's school. Coach Bryant's school. He said, maybe Florida State will be mine. That'll be where I'm going to build my legacy and really set Eddie in. And of course, history was made, and he was the winningest coach, and mm-hmm. all the things he did, and the bowl streaks he won, and the games, and the players, and the legacy. And, Coach Bowden was Florida State. People don't. Here's the other thing. I'll say this. People, you realize when he took the job at Florida State, they were trying to drop football.
Wow. No.
His president there's some businessmen, a guy named Jim Smith, Bill Smith, who's a banker here in town, his dad, and some other folks. The president, there was a huge push from the academians in school, because when Coach Bowden had taken over Florida State, they had won one game in 2 years. During the 60s with Bill Peterson, they had a great run. And when Bobby was an assistant, he and Don James were assistants here at one time together with Peterson. And Parcells was an assistant here. Joe Gibbs was an assistant here in the 60s, all that. But then in the 70s, they lost, and they had won one game in 2 years. And they were trying to drop football, and they had the professors got mad because they were paying Coach Bowden, who came from West Virginia, $35,000 to be the head coach. That's too much money, and and they were trying to drop football. And those guys went to the president and said, "Listen, If you drop athletics, how important athletics is, Florida State's not like it's in a metropolis. We'll just be another school. And they saved football. And Coach Bowden did not have money. And for him to build Florida State into the dynasty he built it with the lack of dollars, the lack of, there's not the facility. I mean, I'm not trying to knock, but that time they didn't have.
Right.
And what he did with less and how he built it, it was his personality, his work ethic, his vision. And he did more with less. I mean, you're talking about he took it to the pinnacle. I mean, other schools have won, but I'm talking about Florida State was the pinnacle of college football. They took it as high as anybody and was there. And what he did and who he was, but he wanted to go to Alabama. He was going to go to Alabama. And then they did that and he backed out. And I'll tell you another crazy thing. Right. At that time, you knew who Florida State was going to hire if Bobby left? Because he didn't have a job at that time. I'll give you another nugget. They were going to hire Howard Schnellenberger.
Wow. How about that?
Because when he left Miami, and then he went to the USFL, and you remember his team folded. So he was out of a job. And he had just won that national championship at Miami in 83. This was 86. And Jimmy was at Miami, so he was going to come back and take Florida State because he knew the state and do that. I mean, how and then he ended up, remember, going to Louisville and Oklahoma and that. I mean, how things in our world over jobs and Joab. I mean, but that was the thing. And Coach Bowden was dying to go back, but then he was totally content and knew he never tried. And after that, he was never interested in another job. And he was 57. He made his legacy at
yes, he did.
Florida State.
Unbelievable legacy. Let me throw this one at you. When I was a young coach, I was a GA. I've told this story a couple of times. I'm the graduate assistant at UCLA, and I asked Jim Herrick one day, I'm really young, and we're on a bus heading to practice one day. We were actually at Cal, and I asked him, I said, what's the biggest difference between being an assistant coach and a head coach? And I was waiting for this amazing answer, like, okay, this guy's going to give me this profound, answer. And he kind of looked around a little bit. He looked right at me, and we're sitting on the bus side by side in that front seat, and he looked right at me and said, lonely. And it hit me for a second.
Yep.
And then, I was an assistant there for 7 years, and I became the head coach at Murray State. But when you become a head coach, like you did, you go from being the assistant coach, now you're the head coach. And probably there were more times I looked back and I was like, wow, there's so much truth in that statement. Not in a bad way. It's not bad. You love being a head coach. I love being a head coach. It's amazing. But when you're the guy, when you're the head coach, I mean, does that resonate with you a little bit? The quote, lonely.
The quote, leadership is lonely. That quote was always in I took that, and people talk, because when you look behind you, there's nobody behind you to help you make that decision. I always said this: every great thing we did on staff, there's 2 or 3 assistant coaches that told me to do it. When we did the wrong things, no one told me to do it. I did. I joke about that, but you carry that burden. It's funny. I always said this. Sometimes I would sit at my desk and I'm thinking about things. I'd look back at that wall and I'd say, you know what? There ain't nobody behind you. You got to make this decision by yourself. But you hit it dead on the head, Mark. Leadership is lonely. It is very lonely. And I always say this about leadership too. Leading the masses and trying to do the right thing in general is an easier thing. And every decision you make, it's easier that way, because what you don't realize, every decision, when you lead the masses, those decisions become easier. But what you worry about your decisions, how they affect that one individual. And individually, how people say, well, just get rid. No, that was one of the things Coach Bowden taught me. He said, listen, every individual matters. He said, use teams, you got to do things for a team. But he said, you got to remember how each decision affects each individual. And he said, everybody needs a second chance. He said, there's times when they were out of chances. But Coach Bowden was the epitome of second. Everybody says coaches do it because, they just want to win. No, that's not right. Because that would you give up on your own kids? Just because your kids make a mistake, you still own them. You stand by them. You may punish them, but you can't. Everybody didn't have a second chance, or sometimes a third chance. None of us would be here.
That's right.
And he taught me that too. He said, leading the masses is easy. It's how each decision affects that one individual or 2 individuals that really reflects your leadership.
Yep.
And he said, when you do that, you're going to have to take some criticism. You're going to have to take some things. He said, that's all part of it. And he said, it's lonely, but he said, you know what? It's part of the job.
It is part of the job. That reminds me of this great story. I'd love to hear what you think of this one. I'm a young guy. My first year at UCLA, we have a player, Trevor Wilson, great player, but just a pain and a complete behind to coach. And we went to breakfast with John Wooden. So we're sitting with John Wooden at breakfast, and we're all talking about Trevor. And if we said tuck your shirt in, he'd take his shirt out. If we said run over here, he'd walk over there. He's one of them. Just driving us all nuts. And you've coached him, I've coached him, we've all had him. But I remember that morning he said, he finally looked, he said, would you rather have him or would you rather not have him? And we said, well, we'd rather have him, and he said, well, hold on. He said, then it's your job to coach him. It's easy to kick him off the team. That's easy.
Yep.
But it's your job to coach him. And I'm sure, Jimbo, you've had guys, I've had guys. Not every player is easy to coach. It's just part of personalities. No. And you have to, figure all that out. And all the success you've had over the years, and you've had an enormous amount of this success, I'm sure you've had to, there's times where you bring a guy, sit him in the office, or you could take him for a walk, or you go somewhere, or their parents are calling you, or but to get to that young man, because there's so much potential there, and you want to see him reach his potential. And you don't want to just dump him, get rid of him. And fans are saying, exactly. Cut that guy, cut him, get rid of that guy, bench this guy. And it's not that easy because you care about people.
Yeah, it goes back to, like I say, that's a mass decision to be popular. You're popular for it, but it's the wrong decision. Who else is going to help him? What else is going to happen to him? And those are your greatest rewards as a coach. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to tell you, the ones you could, I still worry about and think about the guys I couldn't reach. There's always a few of those guys you can't reach. And they still haunt me. They still haunt me to this day, that I couldn't get to him to get him to understand how to function within a group or a society or whatever it is to maximize who they are as people, as players, that whole thing. But to me, that's what coaching is. Mm-hmm. I always say this to your kids. People say, well, how you get them? I said, listen, you got 5 kids in the family. 4 of them are good, and one of them's a knucklehead. You always got a black sheep of the family. That's with the same house, same mom, same preacher, same school. I said, now take 100 of them. You know what I mean? I said, but your greatest, and some of the ones you fought the hardest with, you're the closest with. And I am today. We laugh about it. You know what I mean? I'm talking about and football sometimes, because I get fired. I get a little fired up. I don't, a lot of my person, sometimes it's back off. I've got, some of those guys, and this, there's those strong personalities. If they see weakness, they eat you alive.
That's right.
I've been nose to nose, toe to toe, but it wasn't because I didn't love them. It was because I did care. And then, right. They say things, and then you're the closest with them today as any of the guys. Those are the greatest. Those are what coaching is. If people ask me what I miss, that's what I miss.
Yeah.
I know that sounds crazy, but that's what I miss.
Well,
that whole molding and grinding and just the relationship development of that whole thing.
Yeah, and we could talk for hours about this next one, but just kind of quickly, the part of the and I've had a number of other coaches on, and we've talked about the NIL and the portal and the transfer and kids' money, and not to beat a dead horse, but that whole thing, what you just mentioned is, I think we're losing that. We're losing that ability to have that long relationship with a young guy. I go back to Alabama. They honored one of the teams I coached there, and I had a great run there, and I had a couple guys that are now about 42 or 3 years old, and they looked and said, Coach, if the rules were the same back then as they are today, I'd have left. I'd have left after my freshman year. Like, I would have never stuck in there. And what happened is some of those guys learned how to fight through adversity. They learned how to get better. They learned that they had to look in the mirror and say, okay, how do I get my butt off the bench because coach ain't playing me, and I want to get in the game, and so I've got to work harder. I've got to work on my weaknesses. And I think in this new era, it makes me – I'm happy kids are getting money. I'm all happy for that. I'm with you. But we're going to lose that, what you talked about in that the relationship that you build over a 4 or 5 year period with a kid. Not every kid stays 4 or 5 years, but you have a chance to build that. And so for you, I'm sure, I don't know, maybe your thoughts on, I don't know if you'd agree with that or not, but it just kind of breaks my heart that we're losing that from a coaching and player relationship standpoint.
No doubt. And everybody says, well, you old school coaches listen, I don't care about the money. I don't care about the money. But where I think we're making a mistake is the transfer portal and making it so easy. Listen, and I transferred myself. I just said I transferred. Mm-hmm. There's reasons to transfer, and there's guys I've helped transfer. I went to them and said, listen, you're worried about playing time. It's going to be hard. I mean, but let's give it a fair shot. Let's give it 3 years. Let's give it time, or something happened and I'll help, and I've always helped kids. So I've never stopped them, but you can't run it every time coach gets on my butt. I'm not having success. Life don't care. I mean, and I know them are cliches and they say all that, but that is going to see what I think's made it bad. The NIL with the portal.
Yes.
See, they wouldn't pay somebody $500,000 if they're paying them to sit a year.
Mm-hmm.
And then go play. It wouldn't happen, and people wouldn't be tampering with your roster. Because that whole avenue of things. There's something in there that's got to be a mechanism that allows for those kids to grow. And I'm with you. We're losing out, and how a player develops, the relationship, the pushing, the prodding, the cause and effect. And then, like you say, I've got to change because I do this. This is what I'm getting now. Maybe because I do that, I'll get something better. That's what life is. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's no different. And I'm with you, Mark. It scares me to death, and in the coaching world for what these guys are not getting to see. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? And not finding out about themselves. They're not getting to find out about themselves. Sometimes you got to come to those, you can come to Jesus moment or whatever it is. You have to reach down and, all right, I'm going to do everything I can. And then you live with the results. And then you find out, when I do things right, good things happen to me. Mm-hmm. And I'm with you 100% on that. That's the part that scares me. The NIL, making money, but it's being able to come and go whenever I'm inconvenienced that bothers me. Yep. And and I'm a guy who transferred. I transferred. Mm-hmm. I know that feeling, but it was always with the plan and the coaches and agreement and things that happened. And I think we're missing that. Mm-hmm. And that's the part that I see why you see the inconsistencies like this weekend. Guys don't know who they have. I mean, you got a whole. I mean, you're talking about used to bring in 20 new guys, 25. We did. Basketball. What'd you bring in? 4 to 6 a year, maybe. Is it 4 players a year, 6 players a year? We bring in 20 to 25. You're bringing in 40, 45, 50. Mm-hmm. I mean, 50 different guys a year to coach a team and get on a team. Man, it's gotten crazy.
I remember, Jimbo, at the end of the season sometimes, the season would end and you're exhausted. The season ends, whether it's great, bad, indifferent, however it ends. And we used to have about a 2 or 3 or 4 week period where it was almost miserable because you're trying to figure out, okay, who's staying, who's going, somebody might transfer, and you're kind of re-recruiting your guys. Now it's 100 times worse. Like your whole roster can be transferring, like the whole thing. And hey, Coach Fisher yelled at me. I didn't like him. He did this. He was too hard on me. I can't believe they played that guy in front of me. I'm going to call my mom. I'm calling my uncle. I got to transfer. I'm finding a new school. And, I'm always hunting for something better instead of making where you are the best. Just that. Figure that one out. Now, if it comes a point later where, hey, it's just not working out, I understand. I transferred too. But I sat out a year, by the way, and also I became a fifth-year senior, which I turned 23 my senior year, way back in 1987. But that ability, I think the NCAA is losing our ability as adults to do what's best for young people. That's why we got into coaching. Yeah. That's why you got into coaching. Hey, we all want to win, but I want to do what's best for this person. They may not like it right now, but it's like parenting. I still want to do what's best for them, and I think that's where we've lost it, Jimbo.
I totally agree, and here's and I'll give the NCAA a break on this. Why I think they have given up? They can't win in court. Mm-hmm. These lawyers have taken this thing, in every court case, if you go back and look at, they can't win. Mm-mm. And here's the only way this is going to get fixed. There's one way: our government has to fix it. So I guess we're in trouble. We can't figure out anything. I mean, because we can't get nothing in Washington D.C. I mean, but my point is, every time, like I had a lawyer sit down with me and I said, why can't we do So he went through, he said, this may be one of the most intriguing cases in the United States in the last 50 to 75 years. He said, because every road you go down has a rabbit hole. Mm-hmm. And he said, antitrust laws, this law, this, and everybody can win in court. So the NCAA ends up fighting it, and then it costs them all this money, which they don't have, in their defense. Mm-hmm. And the kid's still eligible to go where he wants to go anyway. Right. And they can't stop it. Our government's got to do something that allows, with our justice system, that these rules they have to set some concrete rules that they can withstand the court. and the law and all the lawsuits that are coming. So somebody has a basis to where this thing can start. Until then, we're like hanging onto our tail, and somebody's just dragging us along like you're. I mean, like in the wind. I mean, they're blowing you from right to left, left to right, because you can't win in court. So every time somebody wants to do something, I'm suing you. Mm-hmm. They go to court and they win. And none of these laws hold up. Our justice system and our politicians have to make something that's concrete and laws of our country that hold up to this. If they don't, this is going to be a free-for-all for 24 hours. And I'm saying that in the NCAA's defense, but there's no doubt.
Right.
And then they still run around and want to punish you because you talked to a guy too long. My God, they're paying $500,000. I mean, some of these things, man, and like you say, I guess they do it to justify their jobs. I get it. I mean, and what goes on, but the real issue is we never want to attack. But our United States government has to make laws that'll hold up in court in our justice system somehow, some way. Until then, we're never going to fix it. I believe that 100%.
Right. Maybe Tommy Tuberville can help us. He's in Washington now working. He's an old coach. Maybe we got to recruit Tommy to say, Tommy, you got to help the NCAA somehow get this thing done.
I promise you this, Mark. If they put old coaches in the government and they had to work on a coach's, in other words, when you're in a week, all right, you got your butt kicked and you got about 3 days of practice to figure it out because you're playing again on Saturday. If they had a coach's urgency to get things done in D.C., we'd be a heck of a lot better than put all coaches in D.C. We'll get that. Now, I'm not saying we ain't always right, but there'll be a bunch get done in a week because we're all used to getting, everything jumping around. They take so long, it's ridiculous.
Let me ask you this one, Jimbo. You're at Florida State. And I think that you had an amazing run everywhere you've been, but there you had a run. I think over a 3-year period. I think I looked this up. I think you guys were 39-3. I think that's correct. And in the middle of that, or at the end of that, was your national championship in 2013. So, here you are coaching. You're a young guy from West Virginia. You've played at Salem State, Samford, you've coached, you've made some stops along the way, and boom, here you go. Did you know during that period, like, we got a chance here all of a sudden? We got the right pieces, the right players, and all of a sudden this thing, we got a chance because we're pretty good. This is a little different than maybe some of the other years I've had.
I really did toward the end of 2011, going into 12, and all the way through till we finished in 17, 18, doing that run. Because here's two things. I was fortunate. We went to Auburn, believe it. I don't know if people remember this. When Terry took over for Pat Dye, we were on probation. We won 20 in a row.
That's right.
Even though in 1990, here's what I always say, Florida State's national championship in 93, Bobby's first team that won it. The only undefeated, untied team in the country that year was Auburn. And we had just played Alabama in 92, who had just won the national. We walked the dog on every. We could have won the AP poll, and they didn't give it to us. I always say Barry Switzer got 2 of his championships on probation in 7. They wouldn't give Auburn one. I always said if that was Alabama undefeated on the AP, they'd have gave it to them. They wouldn't give Auburn one. but anyway, but I was around a bunch of great players. Then we had that run at LSU. We won the national.
That's
I was the OC for Nick, and we won the national championship, and we were in it every year. And then after about that second, I knew we had some guys, and all of a sudden our practice habits started. Around 2012, we went 12-2, then we won. Then we won a 29-game win streak.
That's right.
And then we went to 6 straight bowl game. New Year's 6, that whole thing. All those practices started being the same. Like the practices were where everything was at. When you're having to tell the guys whoa instead of giddy up, these guys wouldn't stop. We had some. Just unbelievably competitive guys. And they love practice. They love physicality. Then you saw the athleticism, and I knew then we had a chance. And then this, it still takes a little bit of luck to win it. You can say it all you want. We won it in 03 and 07 at LSU when I was there. The 05, 06 teams were probably as good or better, but just lost, had a guy injured, ball bounced wrong. I knew we were going to be in that hunt at that time. After going into 2012, I knew we had a chance to do it. And then it's just a matter of tweaking and turning. And I tell you what we did there, that I tried not to press it too much. I created everything about us. Quit worrying about the opponent. We block out social media. And believe it or not, that team in 2013, we lost in 12. Matter of fact, playing NC State, we were ahead 16-0 at halftime. And with Glennon and they come back and beat us 17-16 in And then we're beating Florida at the end of the year, and EJ gets hurt in the fourth quarter. We were ahead and we lost. But we knew we let one get away. And going into that 13 year, we had some we had some guys that listened to me. You're going to be a second or third round pick if you can be a first round pick. Yes, sir. They actually listened back then, and they stayed. And so we had some fourth year guys, you know what I mean, that had tasted it and were right there. They went in and said, guys, they banned each other from social. The whole team never posted for over 7 months on social media.
Wow.
Now think about that.
Wow.
And the team made the rule because they wanted any interference. This thing is about us, guys. We're going to answer. And I had some leaders on that. There was a guy named LaMarcus Joyner who people don't talk about enough. For us, was two-time All-American, was a little safety, 5'8.5", 190 pounds, who was maybe the most violent football player I ever coached. I'm talking about and could hit you. He played 10 years in the league at 5'8", 190 pounds. It was all. I mean, I think it was like the top of the second round pick. But him, Jameis, Devontae Freeman, Carlos, Nick O'Leary, Jalen Ramsey became a young guy on those teams. But Telvin Smith, Timmy Jernigan, they all united. And I've never been on a team, even the other great teams I had, that unified like that. And when they came to me, now I'd mention stuff to them. You guys got to block all this stuff. And they said, well, Coach, what about this rule? And I looked at them like, I couldn't believe it because, we're in the social media craze. This is 2000. It's all that starting. We want nobody on social media. We don't want nobody posting. We want whatever. And I'm going to tell you what, I had about 8 guys. Whatever I said, if it didn't get carried out, my Lord, you talk about the wrath. I didn't have to say nothing. I mean, they were just guys. And if somebody ever said boo to me, man, I said, guys, you don't kill the guy. We still need the guy. I'm just they were worse on him than we were. We had leadership on that team who was driven. And it was just the practices. I put this, I knew we were really good. We always did a drill on Thursdays, or we always finished up. And that's when everybody's kind of winding practice down. It's supposed to be an easy day. We went and we still had shells and pads on those days. And we would do 2-minute drill, ones on ones, one defense versus one offense. And we would go, they wouldn't tackle, but it was stud. And we don't hurt each other. Man, I would have to, the guys who called the game on Saturday would fly in, like Herb Street and them guys would fly in a lot of times on Thursday just to watch the end of our Thursday practice and watch our ones go at. They went at each other like it was the NCAA finals. And they created such that atmosphere. The games were, but you got around them. And sometimes I would go off the field and I'd say, God almighty. I mean, it was just fun to watch them work. And they were selfless. Every play, like you never took a play off. And you got around those, and they would come, if there was issues on the team, sometimes you always have, hey guys, are there any problems I need to know about or so-and-so? They would come and say, Coach, I think we got an issue. What do you mean? I'm going to take care of it. I'll let you know afterwards. I mean, it was just one of those, those special teams and special moments of guys that passed on. That's when I knew. I mean, the players knew we had talent, but that's when I knew going into that year when we said that we got a chance if Lord say the ball bounces right and things go on. Right. Like it was from a personality standpoint and a work ethic standpoint that really jumped out at me.
Jimbo, was it hard for you after you built what you built at Florida State? Oh. And, hey, we've all done it. Coaches, people knock on our door, and it's happened to me. It's happened to you. It's happened to all of you, guys that have had success. But for you, how hard, that's a hard thing.
It tore me up.
Yeah, because you built something special. You had something really special, but there's another opportunity that, you look at, but how hard was that for you to leave Florida State?
Well, I mean, it tore me. I remember I cried. I mean, tears went down my face. I mean, I grew up a Florida State fan because of Bobby. And a lot of the issues came, I don't know if me and Swafford, I did not get along with John. I mean, because I never thought he did what was right for our league.
He's a North Carolina guy. He's Tar Heel.
I mean this from this perspective. I mean, he did a good job on things. He wasn't a visionary. And we're not building the ACC network, letting the SEC and Big Ten start there. And I remember having a conversation. Me and him got into it one time. I was saying, we need to get this net. Well, let's let them do it, and we'll let them make mistakes, and then we'll come back and say, guys, there ain't going to be no money. I saw what was what's happening to the ACC right now. We had those. conversations back in 2010, 11, 12 with him. I saw that vision because I saw what was going on. I knew what was going on. I had connections out there that where this thing was going. And financially, I knew. And in football, you have so many guys. If you don't have those resources for facilities, for recruiting, for all those things, we weren't going to make it. And at that time, actually, believe in 13 or not, the last year that anybody beat the SEC in number of first-round picks and total draft, we did it. And we ACC had more there for 1 year. And if we weren't, we were like 4 or 5 behind them. And I said, we're going to lose it all. And they would not listen. And then Florida State, we had some issues inside what we were doing, and from building facilities to building a building that they're building right now, which they need. And some guys that, again, non-visionary guys. And I never asked for a thing for that. I wanted more facilities and things for us to recruit. And I wanted more upgrades for staff because I knew we needed more support staff for how this game was going in the recruiting world, how it was going in the coaching world. And we just would not make those commitments to those. And listen, Florida State didn't have tons of money, but I was just saying the allocation of things. We have listen, you have to prioritize. And in sports, football's making the money. I know a basketball guy, but football made 90% of the money.
Without a doubt.
Listen, I said, if we're good in football, guess what? We're going to be good in everything because we're going to have money to spend in every sport. And the visionary things to do from a facility standpoint and from a staff standpoint, and to be able to pay coaches, to pay assistant coach, $1 million to a coordinator. I had an issue with that at one. They would not. I had some great guys wanting to come in and be coaches, and I was fighting an uphill battle when I saw where this thing was going, and that was one of the biggest reasons that we just could not get along. And I love the people, and we still talk about today the guys that we were debating back and forth with. I don't have any ill will, but I just know where it was going. And I love Florida State. I was a Florida State fan. It killed me inside to do that, and was never envisioning ever going anywhere. Didn't want to go anywhere. But, hey, that's life. You make choices, and you got to live with them.
What you mentioned, it's interesting real quickly. When I was at Alabama again, and we had been through 4 head coaches in probably my 9th year at Alabama, but I watched Mal Moore do exactly what you just said. I watched Mal Moore when he hired Nick. And a lot of people forget this. He actually offered, and Rich Rodriguez accepted the job, and when he was at West Virginia, and then pulled out. A lot of people forget that one.
I'll tell you a story about that too. Go ahead.
Exactly. And Mal and I were really close, and Mal and I talked all the time. And I think he felt comfortable talking to me, and I would hear all his stories. And he's up in New York, and Rich Rodriguez, and then he said, I'm going to Miami, and I'm going to sit in a hotel room. He called me every night, Jimbo, from the hotel room in Miami when he was trying to hire Nick Saban. He called me every single night. And Jimmy Sexton was my agent at the time, which was Nick's agent, and you obviously know Jimmy. And so, but I watched Mal make a decision to say, I'm going to give him everything he needs to win, because that's how important Alabama football is. And your point is so true, is that when Alabama football has won, everybody wins. The amount of money they're generating for every sport is monumental. But I watched it happen. I watched them give Nick Saban things they didn't give Mike Shula or Dennis Franchione or Mike DeBose. The resources to hire coaches, pay them a certain salary, change the facilities, upgrade everything. And so there's a direct correlation. And Mal Moore was smart enough to do that with Nick. But like I mentioned, a lot of people forget it was almost Rich Rodriguez. Well, it was going to be Rich Rodriguez because he took the job, and then they talked him out of it at West Virginia.
Now, here's a funny story. I'm assistant at LSU at the time. Okay, 2000. And so Rich is taking the job. There was a buddy of mine who I hunted on his property. I was just right outside of Baton Rouge, and a guy named John Stagg. He's hitting his father-in-law's place. He's a great friend of mine, still is. And I'm up there hunting, and there was a big deer I was hunting on their place. When I'd have an afternoon or something, you get a break every now and then. So I'm in the woods. My phone rings. It's Joe Manchin, the governor of West Virginia. And he said, Jimbo, he said, you ready to come home? He said, Rich is, he's the head coach. He's going to take the Alabama job. We want you to be the head coach at West Virginia. He said, we're going to call you here in a little bit. So I said, I said, yeah. I said, I'd be the head coach. I was the OC at there. I'm getting to go on. I said, yeah. Now, here's the funny part. I'm hunting this one big deer. It killed me. I lost two big things in one day, Mark. Here's a funny story. So I'm hunting. There's one deer I'm hunting. All right. So I'm hunting this deer, and I'm in the woods, and I'm walking out, and there's another big 8-point steps out. And I hadn't hunted the deer I was hunting on. And I said, well, you know what? They were sending a plane down to get me. I mean, I'm leaving either that morning or that afternoon, or it's in the morning hunt. I said, what the heck? Well, this big deer steps out, and I said, yeah, to shoot is one that needs to be shot. And I said, I'm never going to get to hunt here again. Heck with it. So I shoot that deer, which is a great deer. I walk out of the woods. I'm getting all my stuff together. 2 hours later, they call me up. Jimbo, Rich is staying. He ain't going. So I lost the West Virginia job, and I shot the wrong deer and didn't get to go back and hunt the other deer because my tag was tagged out. So I lost it all. I lost it all in one day. But that's a true story because Rich was taking that job, and he backed out of it somehow. Right. And then because they were called, but Joe said, we want you to do it. That's a true story.
That's right.
I was going home, and but it's funny you say that. But that's what I was in Louisiana and Baton Rouge at that time. But I was going back to take the head coaching job at that time, and when that happened. So I mean, it's a funny thing how the world goes around in our business. What coulda, shoulda, woulda, and all the jobs you almost took, you didn't take.
You never know.
The relationships. I mean, it's crazy.
You never know.
It's crazy.
I tell people all the time, I could write a book about Alabama, and with football. Mal and I were so close. We talked so much, but he walked me through all of those with Nick. I mean, with Rich. But let me ask you this one, Jimbo, because this is and here's what happens too in coaching. And a lot of people have focused in on your buyout. Okay, you got a big old buyout, and that's wonderful.
Yeah.
But what they don't realize, and people in the media especially, and then fans, because it's happened to me too. It's happened. It's part of us as coaching, a lot of us. When you get fired, when you lose your job, it's hard. It's hard. It was hard.
Oh, yeah.
It's hard. I don't care what that buyout is. Sure, a bigger buyout makes life more comfortable, but it doesn't take away from the sting and how hard it hurts. And so for you, a lot of people, they miss that. They miss it.
They do, because listen, we all got into coaching. I never got into coaching thinking I was going to make $100 million.
Right.
I was making, believe it or not, when I first coached at Sanford, I was a student assistant. I was the OC. All right. We went to national playoffs. I was making $16,000 a year. Mm-hmm. I went to Auburn. We won for it, and I was helping call games and helping the OC. I made $40,000. The most I ever made there was $57,000. We won. I was making $40,000. People say, well, you guys making all that money. I said, you know what? If I wasn't making all this money, I'd still be coaching.
Right.
I coach because I love the sport. I love being around it. I love the kid. What's easy to say when you but I never coach for money. And I always tell young coaches, don't coach for money and try to get the job. Don't try to get the next job. Like Bobby said, all of a sudden, if you just, because you love something, we end up having success and we were pretty good at it, they paid you more money. Mm-hmm. It was a byproduct of the love you had for the game and the reason you ever coached, the relationships. I always knew this as a player. I wanted to play as long as I could. And then I never dreamed of doing anything but coaching, whether it was high school, it was going to be a high school coach, a college coach. I just got fortunate. I was with the Bowden and got an opportunity, but it wasn't for the money. Mm-hmm. It was because I couldn't imagine not being around ball. Mm-hmm. I couldn't imagine those. I always said to somebody, I've never had a job in my life. Mm-hmm. As hard as this job is, I've never had a job in my life because I always have been able to do what I've loved to do. Mm-hmm. I love the strategy of the game. I love the recruit. I love the relationships. I love the coach. That everything that went with it is what I wanted to do my whole life. And so the thing about, you got that's great. It's a byproduct that the success you've had in the past. Mm-hmm. But man, the relationship with coaches, being here with you, man, it's great. It's great therapy to be with other coaches and understand and still talking ball. But there's relationship with the players and going out. And that's what it's all about. And I know people say, well, it's not for me. Mm-mm. I'm 1,000% with you, Mark. I never got in it for money. It was a byproduct of me having success at something I love to do. And I'm one of the most fortunate people in the world.
Yeah. Well, Jimbo, you're an unbelievable guy, and I told you when we started that first time I met you, I said, man, I'm rooting for that dude. And every time I'd turn the TV on,
Same
whether you were
at
Florida State or Texas A&M, man, I was rooting for you. And I always sat back and listened to all the critics, and they, I had them, you had them, we all have them. And it's like, boy, you guys just really don't know. But that's part of our turf. And but anyway, man, I just want to say thank you for being on. And whatever you decide to do in the future, you're going to be amazing at it. It's going to be an unbelievable ride. But just congratulations on your career, man. You did it, and you've done it with great class everywhere you've been. And your next opportunity, wherever that may be, and whatever it may be, is going to be great for you too. So, man, thank you. Thank you for coming on the show.
Like I say, I've always had great respect for you. The same way, the success you've had everywhere you've been has been tremendous. And consider you a great friend. And like I say, the first time I met you that way, I remember watching you play. I remember y'all had those great teams, Alabama, when I first came into Birmingham. And of course, in Birmingham, if you didn't root for Alabama, man, you had to duck your head and everything. But no, I love watching y'all, those teams, and just great respect for what you've done. And I wish, hey, good luck with your fiance and the future of being out there in California, getting married, and all the things you got going on. And this podcast was awesome. And I say, maybe we can keep this going. We'll do it again someday.
We will. All right, Jimbo. Thank you very much, man. Have a good one.
Take care, Mark.
Okay.